This video is sponsored by Action VFX. Action VFX is the largest library of premium VFX stock footage elements with a constantly growing library of over 3,000 elements, ranging from 2K to 6K resolutions, up to 120 frames per second in ProRes, OpenEXR, as well as RAW files straight from the camera. Their products have been used in films and series such as Spider-Man: Far From Home, The Flash, Watchmen, Netflix's The Punisher, and many others. So, head on over to Action VFX and make good use of the Black Friday sale, which begins on November 26th at 8 p.m. EST and will end on December 4th at 12 p.m. EST, with all products being at 55% off during the first 24 hours and 50% off for the remaining days. Alright guys, welcome to today's tutorial in which we're gonna create a slow motion gunshot effect. First and foremost, all the elements that I used in that shot are from Action VFX, and I must say they are insanely well made. There are a bunch of categories and there's a lot of variety in the clips. My experience working with their collection so far has been really great, and I'm sure you guys will be able to get a lot of value from their products. Do make sure to check the description for some freebies that they've been kind enough to provide. Now, I don't want to drag on for much longer, but I do have a few more things I want to point out before we get started. First of all, we shot this with a Sony a7R III at 100 frames per second to give us that sweet slow motion look. We try to keep the setup as simple as possible. We shot this in our basement with most of the available lights and brought in one key light with a softbox just to make our character look pretty, and a separate light right in front, which my sister used a ping pong racket to have it flash whenever our character would shoot the gun. And the gun is just a cheap airsoft gun which doesn't even blow back. With all that said, let's now jump right in and get started. Alright, so here we are now in After Effects, and as you can see, this is the original project that I worked on. Up here, obviously, I have all the elements that we're going to use. I've even gone ahead and categorized and sorted every element so that we can save ourselves some time, just for the sake of the tutorial being as short as possible. Anyway, we're going to leave this original comp here, just so we can maybe reference it later on. Up here, we got the Action VFX elements, and as you can see, I've put everything in its own folder. So we got gun smokes, we got muzzle flashes, shells, and everything like that. So under Gunsmoke, I even have a folder which says used, and this is basically on every single folder. All the elements that were used in the original version. So just to save us some time, I just categorized them under a used folder. As for the muzzle flashes, in this case, you can see it's a pistol, but say it were a rifle or even a shotgun or some sort of like SMG. Well, you would have to use, like, for example, a automatic muzzle flash. So you can see here this one. Say you have like a shotgun, you would use this muzzle flash, for example, or even like a side version. So that's something I wanted to mention when it comes to muzzle flashes. Don't just put on a rifle muzzle flash on a pistol because it does seem off. But for now, let's go over to the footage, and you can see here I got the gunshot footage. And this is the original clip that I used. It was a lot longer, but I did chop it off, did some speed ramping in Premiere, and just exported it as a DNxHR file. Now, if you do a lot of post work and you have to like get your files back and forth between Premiere to After Effects or even DaVinci, then a great format to use would be DNxHR, which is from Avid. I will include the link to the download in the description down below. And then click and drag into the new comp icon. This will automatically create a new composition for us using the same properties as the video file. So if you select the comp, go up to composition settings, you can see it says 1080p, 25 frames per second, and the duration is 5 seconds. Now the time code is kind of messed up, so let's just select that all, just hit 0 and hit OK. Alright, so the first step would be to track this shot. Let's create a new null object, so right click, new null object. You can even go over here to layer, new null, of course. Let's just rename this to track 2D. And then we can select the footage. You can see where the tracker is. So I have it here on my right side. By the way, if you don't see this, say for example, it's closed, you can go over to window, and down here you can see it says tracker. And then we'll just click track motion. Let's just go over to the first frame, and we can scrub through here and see maybe around this part, see what kind of point we can track that doesn't get isolated or blocked by our character here. So I don't know, maybe this point over here, it's got a good contrast. So we'll just scale this up and then bring it over down here. I'm in quarter resolution, by the way, so that it's very low quality. So yeah, and then go back here and just scale these up, and then we can hit track forward. Okay, so once the track is finished, we can simply go to edit target, select the track 2D null that we created and hit OK. And then just click apply to the X and Y and hit OK again. And as you can see here now, if we press P to bring up the position for the null, you can see that all the keyframes have been applied. Now I do want to mention that this is a simple 2D track, since in this case the camera is simply panning. We do have some sort of like 3D orbit around the character as well, but it doesn't really make too much of a difference in this case, so we can get away with a 2D track instead of going in and tracking it in 3D. Now just to give it a quick test, we can maybe like create a new text layer and just type in test, and then we can bring it, say, over here and parent it to the track 2D and just move forward in time and just see that it is indeed well tracked to the shot. So let's just get rid of that and move on. Now let's go up to the action VFX elements and let's start off with, say, a muzzle flash. So let's bring that down. Let's go over to used. As I said before, these were the used ones. And let's just bring it down here. And what we're gonna do is, instead of working in this comp, we're gonna pre-compose this. So let's Control-Shift-C, or you could even go over to Layer, Pre-Compose, and let's just rename this Tutorial Muzzle Flash Pre-Comp. Move all attributes and hit OK. Now let's double click to go inside of that comp, and we're gonna be doing all of the compositing of each of these elements all inside of this comp, and we can just worry about a single layer back here in the main comp. So let's go back and let's just start compositing over different elements. Now let's first focus on the muzzle flashes. So let's go over to the used muzzle flashes and let's just bring in everything except this one because we already have that. Let's just drop it down there and we can turn all of them off for now. Just leave the last one. And what we'll do is let's just turn on the title action save and let's bring this over right here in the middle. And then we can click Y to bring up the anchor point tool, or you can even click up here and we'll click and drag so we can center it to the muzzle flash itself. And this way, when we scale it up and down, so we can hit S to bring up the scale, if we scale it up and down, it scales around that point. Now we could even turn this quality to quarter just so we can work faster for now. And we'll do the same thing for all of these elements. So let's just turn them on one by one and let's just center the anchor point and just click Control Home, which is a shortcut to center the layer to the composition itself. So if you have the anchor point over here, when we click Control Home, it centers to that point. But in this case, we need it to be here. So let's just set it there and then Control Home. By the way, another thing is if you want to pan around, you can click the middle mouse button or even hold down H, which is another shortcut for the pan tool. And now let's do the same thing for all of these. Now for this element in particular, since it is a side angle, we're going to have to put the anchor point right here and then Control Home. And then also, if you go back to the main comp, you can see they are facing on the left side. Now we could simply just transform this, flip horizontal, like flip the entire comp. But let's just do that over here instead. So we can transform, flip horizontal. By the way, I'm just right clicking, transform, flip horizontal. Let's turn on the other side version and let's just do the same thing. And we can go back to the angled versions as well and see if these are going on the left side. So yeah, we can just transform, flip horizontal and do the same thing for this one maybe. Yep. Transform, flip horizontal. Now the front ones won't really matter because they are front side. Now let's just check the front off center. Yeah, this one as well. So transform, flip horizontal. Okay, so once we have all of these set up, let's now maybe turn this one off and let's just focus on having like the initial burst of energy out of the gunshot. So let's just scale this down. So hit S to bring up the scale and just bring it down. We'll try to keep it in the middle. Hold Alt and close square bracket. And this will just trim it to be a single frame long. And then maybe we'll turn on the front 3 And we'll do the same thing for that. And now we'll scale this one down, but just slightly make it larger so it gives off the illusion that it's growing frame by frame. And then let's see, maybe this one, let's just turn it on. Let's go back by a frame, close square bracket, and move it over to frame 3. Again, we don't want to have like a big difference between the last frame and the next frame. So this one, maybe scale it up just a bit. And then maybe this one, let's just bring it over here at the top, move it over. And let's see, maybe right there. Yeah. Yeah, we could even click T to bring up the opacity, decrease the opacity just so we can see where the other muzzle flashes are. I think this is pretty good. We can maybe scale it down a bit and then move it forward by 1 frame. Do the same thing for the one at the bottom as well. Now let's just duplicate this, set the one at the bottom to be 1 frame long, and then just drag this over like that so that we can correct as soon as it goes off of this huge muzzle flash burst. On the next frame, we can just put it right there. Remember, we want to have this cross, this point at the middle, the energy source. So basically this is like the gun barrel. So everything that comes out of here. By the way, another thing I did was time remap some of the elements. So I'll right click, go over to time stretch. And let's just set this to like 200%. So it's twice as slow. And in this case, since it's let's just right click, reveal layer source in project. So this clip and all of these other clips are shot at 23.976. So if we slow them down, we're going to be able to see like a very choppy sort of look because we're going to have duplicate frames. But in order to fix that, we can hit F4 and there's this button here that says frame blending. So we can click once and then click again to have this icon. And this way, also make sure to like turn it on for the comp, which it automatically does it for you when you turn it on for a certain layer. This just makes it so that it sort of like generates frames in between to smooth out the clip so it's not as choppy. Now moving on to the other elements, let's just turn this one on and maybe solo it out. And let's see, let's move over by 1 frame. And for this one, I actually don't want the big muzzle flash here at frame 1, so let's just trim that in. Now we can do the same thing for this one. Let's just see where it ends. So maybe right there, trim it, and then time stretch 200%. Do the same thing with the frame blending, and that's it. Now let's move on to the other one. Again, the same thing with this. I only want it from this point on, so maybe even this point on. Yeah, so let's just trim it there, and let's see with the other one. Let's do the same thing, and let's just bring it over. And by the way, keep in mind, I do want to shift the timing of these by like at least 1 frame, just so that it looks like it's kind of evolving as it's shooting out, so that it doesn't all happen at the same time. And we could even just drag these down at the bottom. Now let's just check real quick if I did do the time stretching for these other two. No, I did not. So let's just set that to 200% and turn on the frame blending for each of them. Let's put our cursor over this window and click the tilde key, which is right below the escape key. And this allows us to full screen any window that your mouse cursor is hovering over. So let's just do that and give it one last preview before we move on to the other elements. Now let's just close down the muzzle flashes elements and let's go over to spark hits. Let's go over to front, and you can see down here it says use. So let's just drag these two down here and let's just check them out. So let's just solo out the first one. I think for the spark hits, I ended up just chopping off everything that just had like the initial explosion. So from this frame on, so from this one, we can just trim it there since that's what I want to use. Another thing you might notice here is that these ones are actually 4K files. So we might have to scale them down and reposition them. So let's just unsolo that. Let's check out the second one and let's see here. So yeah, from this frame on, definitely. So let's just set the anchor point there and do the same thing for the other one. Now you can notice this one is going on the right side, which is good. As for this one, it is going over to the left side. So let's just transform, flip horizontal. Now I do want to make one of them bigger than the other. So maybe this one will be slightly bigger. So we have a bit of a variation. So maybe even shift them off by 1 frame or 2 frames. Oh, and let's just do like time stretch 300% for these ones. In fact, now that I remember, I think these ones actually had, yeah, it says up here it's shot at 60 frames per second. So we can just right click, interpret footage, main, And since we're conforming to 25 frames per second, let's just set it to 25 frames. And you can see it stretches out because now it's actually longer because it is slowed down. And we might have to retrim it in this case. So let's see here. You can see we do notice the big chunk of energy there. So let's just trim it over, and let's do the same thing for this one. Set it to 25 FPS, and let's re-edit that. So as soon as we get to see the smoke, that's where we trim it. Sorry if I might be going a bit quickly here, but you basically get the idea. It's just trimming layers, shifting them in time, rescaling them, positioning them accordingly, just to have that sort of like scaling up big short sort of energy blow. Maybe we can have this sort of last muzzle flash come in, and after that we get to see the sparks, or maybe even a frame before, or 2 frames before. And let's just scale it up. Now let's just turn off the frame blending and set the resolution to 1/4, just so we can speed up the workflow a bit. Maybe even scale this up like quite a bit, like that. Now another thing we could do is select all of them, hit F4, and set them all to screen mode, so they blend with each other a bit better. And let's just bring these spark hit fronts, maybe over here, and maybe even just push them back a bit. And you can definitely notice it looks very choppy now, the muzzle flashes that we slowed down, just because we don't have the frame blending turned on. Now if you go down here to the side, there's some other used sparks that we have, so let's just bring those in as well. And before we do anything else, let's just set them to 25 frames and 25 frames. And solo them out, actually solo out the first one so we can focus a bit better. So we can use them from this point on. And let's just do the anchor point. You can see it's pretty repetitive. It's really nothing too complex. One more thing you might notice is that this is going upwards a bit, so we might hit R to bring up the rotation and just rotate it slightly. If you hold down Control, you can, instead of going up by 1 degree, it just goes up by 0.1 degrees. So we can correct that, make it a bit more horizontal. Now let's bring up this one, bring it over. Again, these are 4K files. I actually want to use this all the way here and set the point there. Right click, transform, flip horizontal, and Control Home to center it. Set these to screen as well, and unsolo them. Let's just bring them over a bit, just so that they come in as these muzzle flashes are coming in. I actually want to shift the smoke a bit, and maybe even just scale these up quite a bit. Maybe not the first one, but definitely the second one. Now, don't worry if it's going off screen here, just because we're going to correct that later. So it starts off small, and then as the time progresses, it just explodes and expands. And I'm thinking this one should be scaled up. I mean, this one should be scaled up, and this one even more. So we have like a huge burst. Maybe not that much, but still. Okay, so as you can see, I played around with this quite a bit. You can see down here, I duplicated a lot of these elements, shift the timing, just mess around with it quite a bit, just to add as much detail as possible. And you can also notice that I did color code them just to make it a bit easier to know what each layer is. Now, of course, no muzzle flash is complete without some smoke. So let's go over to gun smoke folder, and you can see down here it says used. And we can select all of those, and let's make sure that they are all the way at the bottom. And then we can solo these out one by one and just position them accordingly. Now, of course, these are 4K as well, so let's just hit S, scale them down. And then we can select all of these, right click, transform, flip horizontal, and just click Control Home so they all get centered to that point. Now these also have 60 frames per second, so we can do the same thing with these ones. So right click, interpret footage, set them to 25 frames per second. And then we can do the same thing with the other two and just play around with the timing, with the shapes, the scale, and all that stuff until we're happy with the final look. Okay, so after playing around with all of these elements, you can see I trimmed the smokes, rescaled them, even added some masks to them just to select, sort of like isolate certain parts of the smoke, set them to screen. Of course, I did turn them into 25 frames per second, so they are indeed slow motion. Now the plan for this composition is to just finish it off and then render it out as a single element so that we can bring it back to the original comp and use that instead of this comp itself, because we can't afford to like render out these elements constantly frame by frame. There's just a bunch of layers on top of each other. But before we do that, let's just right click, new solid, By the way, you can use Control Y, or you can even go over to Layer, New Solid to create a new solid. And let's rename this background and set the color to black. Hit OK, bring it at the bottom. And the reason we're doing this is because we want to render this out with a black background, so that when we bring it back here, we can just set it to screen and everything is going to be in order. Now, another thing we could do is just export this with an alpha channel. But in this case, let's just leave a black background on it and let's move on. Now let's right click on the composition itself and go over to composition settings, and let's lock the aspect ratio, and let's just make that 3080 by 40, which is the 4K resolution, and hit OK. Next up, let's create a new null object, and this is going to be our controller. And what we're going to do is select all of these elements and parent them to the controller. And this way we can simply reposition the null, scale it up, and everything else is linked to it, so they're going to react. And what I want to do in this case is scale this up so that it fits with the entire screen, and just make sure we don't cut anything off. So maybe we'll just set it to 175% scale just for safety. And let's make sure that we make as much use of the entire composition as possible. And now we could go ahead and just render this out. But one last thing I want to do is split the composition into two, which means we're going to have all the muzzle flash elements into one comp and all the smoke elements into a separate comp. So let's right click on the composition, go over to reveal composition in project, and we can duplicate this and rename this tutorial smoke pre-comp. We can open that up. Delete all of the muzzle flash elements in here and delete all the smoke elements in the muzzle flash comp. And the reason we're doing that is so that when we render these out, we have better control over the different elements. So we got one layer for the muzzle flash and another layer for the smoke. So now let's go over to the muzzle flash comp. Let's see, let's find where the last frame is. So maybe, I don't know, maybe 2 seconds. Let's hit N over there. And let's go over to the smoke comp as well. And now since we're in this composition, let's go over to composition, add to render queue, and go over to the muzzle flash as well, composition, add to render queue. Now let's do quick time and quick time. As I said before, we could have done RGB alpha, but I do prefer having a black background. And once we have the location set, let's just click render. Okay, so I rendered out the elements and brought them in. So let's just click and drag and put them into the composition. And let's just select them first and set these to screen. Then let's just bring them over and let's see about repositioning these. First of all, let's just parent them to the track 2D. Let's move to a point in time where the gunshot happens. So maybe at this frame, and we can hit star to make a keyframe right here. So we can double click on that, add a comment. So like bam. Sublama-jam. And then we can bring over the muzzle flash gunshot. Let's see, first frame right there. And do the same thing with the smoke. See where the smoke comes in, right there. Maybe move it over by 1 frame or 2. Okay, so there you go. It's already looking pretty nice. Now, one thing I am noticing here is maybe the smoke is still a bit quick. So we could do something like right click, time stretch this to 150%, for example. And of course, turn on the frame blending. Yeah, it looks much better now. Flows with the timing a lot more. Now, I don't know if you notice here. I think in the original version, I just chopped it off at this point, but you can see because we had my sister turning on the light and turning it off just to like simulate the gunshot effect or like the muzzle flash lighting. She turns it on right here, which makes me think like maybe we should just push this a bit since that's where the light comes in, and maybe even just bring them up a bit. So she turns the light on right here and then turns it off like way too late. But of course, if this was in real time, you probably wouldn't be able to notice it. But since this is slow motion, you tend to notice these details a lot more. But in the original version, I think I just chopped it off here as soon as the light turns off, just to not distract you and also hide our mistakes. Anyway, moving on. One detail I did add is simulate some lighting from the muzzle flash on the smoke. And the way I did that is to just add some tint effects and some brightness and contrast effects. So let's just select the tutorial smoke material and control space to bring up the effects console. This is a free third-party plugin from videocopilot.net. It's a pretty cool plugin. I use it all the time. It's pretty much just control space, search for the effect, and hit return to add it. So let's just type in tint, hit return, which adds the effect. And of course, this is going to make it black and white, but what I do want is like sort of like a yellowish color. So something like that. Also, let's control space, add brightness and contrast, and let's just bring this up. So you can see what I mean now once we keyframe this stuff. So let's go over here at this point, set a keyframe for both of these, set the amount of tint to 0% and the brightness to 0. And then we can go back to where the highest point is. So the most amount of energy is right here. We can bring up the brightness to 100% and the amount of tint to 100% as well. And then go back to the first frame and set these back to 0% as well. Now we can click U to bring up all the keyframes, select all of these and just right click, Keyframe Assistant Easy Ease, just to smooth them out a bit. Now we could maybe bring this in a bit because there's not much lighting left at this point. But at this point we can just increase the brightness quite a bit. Another thing we might do is, just because the smoke's a bit too much, I think we might turn down the opacity slightly, so like 70%, and even start fading it off from this point on. So let's set a keyframe there, move forward to maybe 4 seconds, set it to 0%, and we'll easy ease this one, right click, keyframe velocity, and we'll set like the outgoing velocity to like 75% or something. So it slowly or smoothly starts fading out. Now let's move on to the distortion effects, and these are going to be the turbulent displace and the liquefy effect. So let's right click, new, adjustment layer, and let's rename this turbulent displace. Bring this right below the muzzle flash, since we don't want to affect the muzzle flash but only the smoke and everything underneath that. And then we can control space, turbulent displace, and now we can start playing around with this. So first of all, let's just draw a mask right around the barrel here. So click and hold on the rectangle tool and go down to the ellipse tool. You can click Q, by the way, to select it as a shortcut, and also just click Q to toggle between the different shapes, as you can see up here. And now let's just turn it off, and let's just click and hold down Control and Shift as well, just to make it symmetrical. Maybe bring it down a bit, and we'll hit F to bring up the feathering and just feather it out like 75%, and we'll turn it back on. We want to make sure that the size is not too big, because then when we feather, you're going to be able to notice these sort of artifacts. So if we scale this up, so yeah, this is what I mean. If we scale it up quite a bit, since you're feathering it out and it's very huge in size in terms of the displacement, you can see like certain parts here just get like split apart. So we don't want that. Let's just set it the size to like 35%. So even if we have like some sort of feathering, you're not going to be able to notice those issues. Let's just trim it here. So Alt, open square bracket, and let's just set the amount to 0% and set a keyframe for both the size and the amount, and also the evolution. Now click U to bring up the keyframes, maybe hit M to bring up the mask path as well, and we'll just definitely just scale it down right from that point. And as we move forward, we want to scale up the mask path from that point. So we'll just scale it up like that, maybe even bring it over. And what we'll do is right here at the peak of the energy, we'll just increase the amount quite a lot. And we'll go back as well. And we'll also set a keyframe for the size. Go back a bit, set the size to 0%. Also, I did turn on the stopwatch for the evolution because I do want to have some sort of evolution going on. So let's move over to like this frame, and let's just set this to do a full 360 degree spin. We might want to scale this up even more. So let's double click on the mask, hold Control Shift to scale it proportionally. Now, of course, we do want to fade it out. So as time goes by, so on the last frame of the mask path extrusion, we'll just set it back to 0%. Whereas the size, we can maybe like push it to 55. But of course, we do have to be careful about those sort of problems that I mentioned before. And you do keep in mind that just because you can add this like displacement effect doesn't mean you should go over the top with it. Okay, now once we're done with the turbulent displace effect, let's go over to the gunshot footage, like the footage itself, and let's add the liquefy effect. And with this one, what we'll do is first, let's just set the position or like the mesh offset. So let's just click on this button and set it to right here. And let's pick this tool and let's just solo out the footage. We can zoom in here and just click and bulge it out as much as possible. Now I do want to make sure that this brush size gets scaled up over time as we're bulging it out. So something like that. And then what we can simply do is just animate the distortion percentage to go from 0% to 100%, or maybe lower because I think it's a bit too much right now, and then back to 0%. So let's quickly do that. Let's set a keyframe, select the layer, hit U to bring up the keyframes, And let's see, this is where the shot happens. Let's unsolo. Yep, that's where the shot happens. And so let's go over to the peak, set it to 100%, go back, set it to 0%, and then go over to this last frame and set that to 0% as well. You could maybe ease this. And I think it's pretty much in the sweet spot when it comes to intensity. Okay, so moving on, we're gonna take a look at how we can make the gun barrel slide backwards when it shoots. And of course, this could have easily been solved if I only had an airsoft blowback gun. But anyway, extra points for you guys, I guess. So let's just duplicate this. We can turn off the liquefy effect for now, and let's just solo out the footage. And we'll find a point here where the shot happens, so maybe right there. And we'll zoom in here. Let's just right click, time, freeze frame. So we want to grab a freeze frame of this shot, and then we'll zoom in here and let's just draw around the barrel. So let's see, let's just make a mask, click there, and there you go. I masked out the barrel. We can maybe hit F to just feather it out by like 3 or maybe even 2. Now let's go ahead and just animate this, but first let's just Alt, close, open square bracket to trim it there. Hit P to bring up the position, set a keyframe. And what I think I did it in like 6 frames in the original comp. So 3 frames to go backwards and then 3 frames to go forwards and get back to the initial state. So we'll just manually track this in. So let's see, let's bring it there. We can also hit Shift R to bring up the rotation while at the same time keeping the position. Hit the stopwatch for the rotation as well, because we're gonna need to rotate this gun also. So hit Control or like hold Control, and we'll just rotate it. I noticed that it is rotating from like this point down here. So let's just fix that. Actually, let's undo the stopwatches so we can do this properly. And we'll just set it like right there so we can easily control the rotation. And let's just set a keyframe there, move forward by 1 frame. And let's just have it go back a bit, rotate so it stays along that line. And you can notice here there's like duplicate elements here, but we're gonna clean that up later on. Move forward by 1 frame. Go back, rotate it again. Now we could leave it there to linger for a single frame, and then on the next frame it just goes back basically. And we can maybe just solo these out so that the muzzle flash doesn't get in the way. 1 more frame. I guess this is the point where it just comes back into place right there. Now we can give that a quick preview. And I'm thinking maybe we should just trim off that lingering keyframe. So let's just delete that, bring these 2 in. And also the last frame doesn't need to be seen. So of course we do need to turn on the motion blur for this layer. Okay, so that looks pretty good. Now we can move on to the part where we clean this up. But of course, I did forget to mention that we're also gonna be making like some sort of gap right here where the bullet comes out of. So in order to do that, what I did was let's just go back in time and let's find a place where we can see the entire background, like at least this part. So you can see right here, it's not being blocked by the character. So what we can do now is duplicate this footage, time, freeze frame again. And what we'll do is to make it stick to the actual footage, we'll just parent it to the track that we did before. So everything should stick now. Let's just mask around this part. Let's make sure that we rename our layers just to keep it as organized as possible. Barrel blowback footage. And also definitely don't forget to save your projects. Now let's bring the fill cleanup behind the footage, and we'll also like feather it out a bit. Now the ordering for these layers is going to be very important, so let's just think for a moment. Let's just select this barrel blowback, hit T to bring up the opacity, turn it down so we can see what is going on underneath. And this way we can follow the barrel blowback with the mask, set a keyframe there, move forward by 1 frame, and you can see how the barrel is going back. So you can go back with a mask, move forward by another frame, go back with a mask again. Of course, this might seem weird, and that's because the fill cleanup mask is not as large as it should be. So we need to make sure this is just covering up the entire thing that needs to be shown behind. We can feather it out as much as we need to. Of course, we do need to feather this out as well. Maybe not that much, maybe 5%. And then hit M to go back to the mask path. Now I think it's going back a bit. Maybe even just close this out. And then in the next frame, it's just pretty much gone. So let's just bring it out of the comp. Go back to the first frame. It's there. Frame before, it's not even there. So let's just bring it out of the comp. Of course, maybe we could just extend this even more just to have it be a lot more visible. And now what we'll do is duplicate the footage and we'll rename this footage matte barrel. Bring this on top of the barrel blowback, and then we'll hit M to bring up the mask path, set this to add, so it actually isolates only that part, and we'll use that part as an alpha inverted for the barrel blowback. So let's give that a quick preview now. Yep, there you go, looks pretty good. Now we can move over to adding some spark bursts here and also a shell casing just flying over. So let's go over to the project, go under Action VFX Elements, and let's see, let's find the shells used and make sure it's right underneath the barrel blowback. Now this is at 30 frames per second, so we could maybe just right click, interpret footage, set this to 25 just so we get like extra 4 frames. First of all, let's just scale it down so that the size matches with the gun. So let's see, something like that. So 21%. Let's go over here. We can first of all track it to the track TD or like parent it. And I think this point in time is gonna line up pretty well because the angle, I mean, is perfect. So Alt, open square bracket, trim it there, hit P to bring up the position, set a keyframe, and we'll go over by, say, we're at 2 seconds. We'll go over by 1 second, so maybe at 3 seconds, and we'll just bring it down here. And you can see these points here. These are basically the curves, so we have to like drag them out so that the angle is right for this shot. So something like that. Yeah, I think that looks on point. Control space, hit directional blur. We'll just make the angle correctly, so like it's going like this way, and we'll increase the blur length to like 15% maybe. Just because I don't want it to have this much motion blur. And also we can just simply control it, so something like, yeah, definitely, let's just set it to 15%. Of course, you do notice that the shell is very bright. Brighter than it should be in this case, but I did mention before that we're going to be taking care of all the visual details all the way at the end, like adding glow, color correcting, all of that kind of stuff. Now let's go over here to the point where we can no longer see the shell, and let's just trim it. By the way, I don't know if I mentioned this, but if you click Ctrl-Shift-H, you can hide all the UI elements so they don't get in the way or they don't distract you. And I do encourage you guys to learn as many shortcuts as possible because it does speed up the workflow a lot. Okay, now let's go back to the project and maybe bring in this gun smoke side 6. And this is gonna be our smoke that pops out of the gun barrel here. Let's scale it down. Of course, it doesn't need to be that big. And maybe even set it to screen. And let's see, that's where it pops out. So let's bring the anchor point right at that point. And then track this to the track 2D and just bring it over. Hit R to bring up the rotation and just spin it in that direction. Also hit S to bring up the scale and just scale it down quite a lot because it definitely can't be that big. Maybe bring it below the barrel blowback, trim it there, bring it down like that. We could even just do like 150 or maybe even 200% speed and then hit F4. Turn on frame blending. Maybe even just turn down the opacity just a little bit so we don't see it as much. Now let's also bring in this side Colt 45 side element just to give it a bit more of a spark as well. I want to trim off this first frame of the muzzle flash. Before we do that, let's just stretch this out for like 200%. Frame blend that, and let's just find the part where we can only see this like long horizontal line. So yeah, from here. Track this to the track 2D. We'll set the anchor point right there. Of course, do make sure to set it to screen. In fact, in this case, we'll just set it to add because we do want to make this pop a lot. And we'll bring it into position, scale it down, and rotate it as well. I do think though that it is still a bit too big, so let's just scale it down a bit. I think we need to, we definitely need to animate it so it follows the barrel as well. So hit P to bring up the position, move forward by 1 frame, bring this over so that we don't lose visibility of it. And we'll just keep it at the corner here, like that. And all that's left here is just to add some environment lighting, just to help out the light that is coming in from on set, from location. Put a layer on his hand, put a layer on his face, maybe on his body, and just so we can control them separately. You know, of course, the hand is going to be a lot brighter than the face, and the face is going to be brighter than the body. And once we're done with that, we'll just go ahead and just tweak the look of the muzzle flash, the smoke and all that, and just wrap it up. So let's right click, new adjustment layer. We'll call this lighting hand. Let's just go ahead and track this frame by frame. So we'll solo out the footage and start masking around this. Now we'll hit M to bring up the mask path, set a keyframe there, and just start animating. Okay, so I think this is definitely enough, since at this point there's actually no more sparks or anything left to emit light. So we'll just trim it there and trim it here. And we'll control space to add a brightness and contrast, and also control space hue and saturation. And what we'll do now is just brighten it up like a lot, and also give it a lot more saturation. And we'll just animate these two values as the light comes in. First of all though, let's just hit F to bring up the feather and just feather it out like crazy. And also double click M, so MM, and bring in the mask expansion so that it doesn't just expand out of the gun. So we just expand it in a bit, and this way it just affects the hand. Now let's set a keyframe for the brightness and set a keyframe for the channel range, and we can move forward here. And at this point is basically the brightest part. So let's hit U, bring up the keyframes, set a keyframe here, and then go back to like this spot and set a keyframe there for 0% and also 0% of the saturation. We can copy these over and just paste them here. So as the shot happens, the lighting comes in as well. We could simply just move them over like that, and then maybe even bring this over, and we'll easy ease these. Easy ease these. I'm also thinking of bringing this back to normal speed, just so it comes in a bit quicker and just fades out, because it's just it's a bit too distracting. As you can see here, I duplicated the adjustment layer and did some separate lighting for the face and also the body. And you might notice here the opacity is different on all of these. So for example, the arm is at 56%, the face is at 50%. So there you go. Okay, so now that we're pretty much done with the integration of all of these elements, let's now move on to making this look as pretty as possible. Let's just start off with the muzzle flash. So let's control space, add a glow effect, and we'll basically just increase the radius quite a bit. We'll decrease the intensity and just bring up the glow threshold. Yeah, you can definitely tell how much cooler that looks already. And what we want to do is have different versions of this. So we'll duplicate this now. Have this be bigger, but a lot softer. So like the radius is going to be a lot higher, like that. And duplicate it one more time. And we'll just crank up the intensity and just crank up the radius a lot. So we have that smooth roll off, smooth glow, which makes it look very nice. So there you go, there you go. Oh my god. Now I do see here some artifacts going on just because we're pushing it a bit too much. So maybe we'll crank it down a bit. Maybe we'll just decrease the intensity for this one and also the other one. With the glow, it just looks so much better. And I think what I did in the original one is on the first couple of keyframes, or maybe like 3-4 keyframes here. So up until this point, we'll duplicate it one more time. We'll trim it there. And you can see what happens here. It just kind of messes it up. So let's just delete the glow, add a fast box blur, increase the radius a lot. So, you know, these first few frames are like a lot brighter, and maybe even just bring it over and click T on the opacity, and we'll just animate the opacity to fade out. So 100% at first frame and 0% at the other frame. And we'll even just easy ease this one out. Also, let's correct the shell. So control space, brightness and contrast, and also hue and saturation. We want to make sure we decrease the saturation quite a bit. Make it as dark as possible. Maybe even add a curves effect. Just bring it down, set it to full, and solo these out so we can see them better. So let's see with and without effects. Okay, so as far as the muzzle flash is concerned, this is what I meant when I said we need to export these elements separately, because if, say, the muzzle flash and the smoke were a single element, when we added a glow effect, it would also affect the smoke. And in this case, we do not want that. We only want to add glow to the muzzle flash itself and not to the smoke. I think I also added a glow effect to the spark of the bullet shell here. So if we go back, yeah, it looks a bit too dead for me. So let's see, where is that? Is that it? Yes, that's it. So we can duplicate that, add a glow effect, and we'll just increase the radius like a lot, and maybe even just decrease the opacity. And we'll copy this, paste it to the bottom one, and we'll just set the intensity to like 0.4 so that it has a lot more punch to it. Anyway, back to the main comp. Okay, so there you go. That's the final version of the shot. And of course, if you're gonna look closely, there's probably gonna be a lot of differences between this one and the tutorial version. And that is definitely understandable because I did spend a lot more time on this as opposed to the tutorial version, just to like, for the sake of the tutorial being as short as possible. Now, apart from the elements and all that, the final two things I did was just recomposite the shot, so like scale it up and reposition it to like fit better within the screen, and also did the final color grading. And I'll show you that within here. As you can see, it's the final comp, but you can see what happens here. Let me just turn off this RSMB effect. So if we select this one, hit U to bring up the keyframes, you can notice here the position changing. So it goes from that part to this part. So you can see what difference it makes. So like it's a lot more focused on the gunshot itself. And at the beginning here, you can see I have the RSMB effect, which is a third-party plugin, which basically just adds motion blur to a shot. And the reason I did this was because we did shoot at a higher frame rate because it is slow motion. And so in the normal speed here, I did want to introduce some motion blur. Of course, this is a third-party plugin, but I do believe that After Effects has its own smart motion blur. So I think it was CC Force Motion Blur. Yep, that's the one. So if we turn that on and off, you can see it pretty much has the same effect. So you can see what that does. It definitely just adds motion blur to the movement. So yeah, apart from that, I did do some minor color grading to like balance out the shot, and that was pretty much the final version. Another thing you may notice here is this gun barrel, and if we just solo that out and the footage itself, basically what I did was just find a metal pipe image on Google and just tracked it on top of the gun, so that when the barrel goes back, it actually reveals the pipe underneath, which ended up being useless because with all of the elements back on top, you couldn't even see it. And this is basically why I didn't cover it in the tutorial. It's pretty much simple. So let's just right click, reveal layer source in project. And it's just this material. And I'll include this in like the project pack as well, no problem. I just Googled metal pipe or something like that. Masked it out, position it properly, just tracked it by hand frame by frame since it's just a few frames anyway. So yeah, it does look actually pretty sick when you watch it all in motion. Again, if I had an airsoft gun, all of this hassle would have been avoided, but oh well. Okay, so with all that said, let's now move on to the outro of this video. Alright guys, thanks for watching and being patient all the way through. Consider subscribing and hitting that bell button to be notified whenever a new video comes out. If you want to follow my work or ask me any questions personally, then you can find me on Instagram. If you have any suggestions, then leave a comment down below. Thank you once again for watching, and I'll see you next time.